How's it going, everybody? It's Carlos, one of your hosts of the Bring on the Blitz podcast. I'm joined here, like I am every week, with Rios. How's it going, Rios?
When does the cold weather come? I'm tired of this sun.
It's hot. It is hot. And of course, we got the one and only Poppy in the house. How's it going, Poppy?
What's going on, guys? Everything good on this end?
All right, all right. And then, of course, we got the Hall of Famer himself as our guest tonight. We got the one and only John McClain in the house. How's it going, John? Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure, guys. It's an honor being on Bring on the Blitz.
Thank you, sir. All right, we will be talking with John McClain about the Texans preseason, some of our highlights, some of our lowlights, and, of course, an interesting Andre Johnson Hall of Fame story. All this and more when we return from our intro. Hit it. You've been such an influential voice for many years for many people here in Houston. Can you give us basically an example of how you got into journalism?
I grew up in Waco. I was a diehard fan of the Baylor Bears, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Houston Colt 45s, who became the Astros, of course. And my father was a diehard sports fan, and he got me interested in sports. And I loved all sports, but especially football, college and NFL, and baseball. I like the NFL and the NBA and NHL when they get to the playoffs. Although I'm much more interested in the Rockets this year after the improvement they made last year under Mendoza. And so I had no idea what I wanted to do when I went to high school, had no idea when I got out. One of the things I knew, I wanted to go to Baylor. And the smartest thing I've done in my life, other than marry my wife, Carol, and she might disagree with that, but I'll tell you, I went to junior college in Waco, McClain Community College, and I took courses that would transfer to Baylor that were a lot harder in Baylor, like for religion, for instance. Religion was tough at Baylor, and it was really easy at McClain. So when I was a sophomore at McClain Junior College, I was looking for classes that were easy. I was always a terrible student. It took me an extra year to get out of high school, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so somebody told me an easy class that had a lot of students in it where you wouldn't get called on was an introduction to mass communications. And I said, well, what is it? Said, well, it has to do with communications, radio, TV, newspapers. And I thought, yeah, that sounds easy. So I went in that class, and a guy sitting next to me, his name was Kurt Wallace, and I'll never forget this. And we talked about sports. And he told me he was a photographer at the Waco Tribune Herald, worked for Dave Campbell in sports. Dave Campbell, of course, founded Texas Football Magazine, was the sports editor for 44 years at the Waco Tribune Herald, and he was a guide to any sports fans in Central Texas and really the state of Texas because of Texas football. Back then, of course, there was no internet, and so Kurt and I talked a lot about sports. So about the third class, he tells me, he said, you know a lot about football, right? And I said, oh, yeah, I know more football than anybody in Waco. And he goes, well, we got an opening on Friday Night Football. Would you be interested in that? I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, in newspapers during football season, because it's such a big deal, high schools, and we cover them all over Central Texas. We have people we bring in the office, and you come in at 8 and you leave at 12, and correspondents at the stadium will call in. You will fill out a form for statistics, and then you'll take them in and give them to the sports writers, and they'll write it. Would you be interested in that? And I said, how much does it pay for 4 hours? $25. I said, wow, I'll take it. I said, can I bring my girlfriend? Says she know anything about football? I said she wouldn't be my girlfriend if she didn't. So we went in that room. It was the newsroom, and it was my first taste of Friday Night Football in the state of Texas other than attending games. in high school. And so I noticed at 12 o'clock, everybody in that newsroom, there must have been 40 people brought in to fill out those forms and take them to the sports department. And I noticed they all left. Well, we stuck around because to talk to the sports writers. And so I got to know them, and they let me stick around and do track agate. Nobody wanted to take calls about filling out track forms, and I did it. And while I was going to McClain Junior College, and I hung out there. And then when they told me that you could get in ball games free, I'm like, what? He said, you can get in ball games free if you're a sports writer. I said, so I could go to an Astros game? Sure, anytime. Cowboys? Sure, anytime. Baylor? Anytime. And I was, holy smoke. I immediately took typing, and I took shorthand, and I started taking English and journalism. And so right after my sophomore year at McClain, they had an opening, and I was hired by Dave Campbell in 1973, when I was going in my junior year at Baylor, and they put me on high schools, and I ended up taking me an extra year to get out of Baylor because we were working 60 hours a week, and I'd get home about 2:30 or 3 in the morning. Supposed to study, I didn't, because I already had a job. I knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a sports writer, and I wanted to be in Houston or Dallas. And so I barely got through with school. But I got out, and I think I probably had about a C average. And then one of my mentors, who I am taking to the Astros and Red Sox game Tuesday night, Tony Peterson, who was on that staff, he got me hired, and he came to the Chronicle, got me hired in Chronicle. And then when he became sports editor, he put me on the Oilers. And then he was the youngest managing editor in Texas. And I told him, I keep making you look real good, don't I? And he ended up being the editor of the Chronicle, and then he left and went to SMU as head of communications, and he's retired now, and he's coming back, and I'm going to take him to see the Astros on Dollar Dog Night. And he and Dave Campbell, the late great, who died 2 years ago at 95 while he was working on another book, and a guy named David McCam, who was head of journalism at Baylor, and then worked at U of H. He's 91. He and I still go to lunch every 2 or 3 weeks. Those are my 3 mentors in this business. And I've had others who've helped me, but those were the main ones that helped me get to where I am today. And when I got my first chance to go on radio, a lot of sports writers, bosses wouldn't let them go on radio. Said, why should we give them your expertise for free? Where my boss, Tony Peterson, said, hey, that's great pub for the Chronicle. As long as they mention you are from the Chronicle, you do radio, you do TV, you do anything you want. And the first time I went on was my first road trip with the original Arrows in 1976. And I've been doing it now. This is my 48th year. I covered the Arrows. 77 was my first training camp with the Oilers. And I'll tell you all a quick story.
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
That first road trip, Jerry Trupiano, the godfather of Houston sports talk, he had a show on KTRH, Sports Voice of the Southwest. And at the time, they had the Astros and they had the Oilers. And on the first road, and the Arrows. And I tell people, going across 2 countries, covering the Arrows and learning about hockey, I didn't know jack squat about it when I came to the Chronicle. And I might have lied a little bit. And I tell people, riding around Canada and the United States and learning hockey from Gordie Howe, Mr. Hockey, was like learning the Bible from Jesus. And it was an experience. I'd been on one plane in my life going from Waco to Odessa for a junior college journalism conference. And then after one game here at the Summit, which is Lakewood Church now, we take off on a 2-week trip all over Canada and U.S. And so my first road trip, we end up in Quebec City watching the Nordiques and the Arrows. And the Arrows were real good. They had won 2 championships with Gordy Marty and Mark Howe. And then they lost in the championship round when I got there, but they were good. And because of Gordie Howe, fans came out for skate-arounds, didn't sell the buildings out. It was free. But they came out to see Gordie Howe, who came out of retirement at 44. And at the time, that was unheard of.
Wow.
Now it's not. And So Jerry Trupiano asked me after the first period if I wanted to go on the radio with him. And I said, I've never been on the radio. And he says, okay, well, I'll just ask you a few questions. And I said, sure, just don't ask me about hockey. He said, well, why? I said, I don't know anything about it. How'd you get the job? It's a long story. And it was real loud in that old building, La Coliseum. And they moved to Denver, became the Nordiques. I mean, the Avalanche. And it was really loud. And while I was looking around, fascinated at being in Quebec, in Quebec City, and I noticed that all the women standing at the exits had on tight red skirts, tight red sweaters, red Jackie Kennedy pillbox hats, and they stood at attention with their arms behind their back as straight as could be. And I'm looking at them, and I see Trupiano pushes a microphone in front of me, and I'm waiting for my headphones so I can talk, and I hear him ask me, and it's loud, even between periods, I hear him ask me, well, what do you think about your first trip to La Coliseum? And I said, man, I can't believe all the women got such big breasts. I didn't use breasts, though. And he goes, I hear him go, you can take the boy out of Waco, but you can't take Waco out of the boy. We're going to go to a break, try to get to the bottom of this, and we'll be back if the FCC allows it. And he takes his headphones off and he goes, what the hell are you doing? I said, I didn't know we were on the air. He said, why do you think you got a microphone? I'm asking you questions. And I said, well, I'm waiting for my headphones. He said, I use those to communicate with the producer back at the studio. And I said, oh, I didn't know.
Whoops.
And I thought my radio career was over. And he said, well, I'll put you back on. And can you talk without mentioning words like that? I said, well, of course I can. And every time I talk, I make really sure that I don't say anything. Let me knock on wood.
Yeah, man.
He kept putting me on. And when I moved to the Oilers, he put me on. And then in 1985, 40 years ago, he said, would you like to do a regular weekly show with us in which you'll get paid? And I said, hell yeah. And so I started with him, and I stayed there. I think I stayed there from 85 till I moved to 610 because Bob McNair told me a year early that they were going to be at 610. I wanted to be on the flagship station, and I think I went there in 2000, and then I got laid off in February from 610, even though I'm still on there 3 times a week on Texans radio. And there were no hard feelings. I understood what was going on at the time. So I've been blessed about the radio career. I've said a lot of stupid things, but nothing with parentheses, breast, close parentheses. In it.
That's good, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That like, because me and the guys, when we talk about sports, we let ourselves go and we just start saying whatever comes to our mind. So it's hard to like keep that out of it whenever we're doing these shows. Like like the conversations we have between us as friends and what we say on the show, sometimes it bleeds a little bit into it. But it's tough, man, especially for me, man, because sometimes I just go off the rail.
He's our wild card.
Who you? No, not at all.
But I'm trying my best.
You know how many times I have to edit a show because I have. No.
I wanted to ask you though. Besides, going to the games for free and all that.
I got another story. Hang on.
Oh, go
I'm
for
sorry.
it. Go
When
for
you're
it.
old as I am, you've been doing this long. I got a million stories.
Oh yeah.
So how did I get on the Oilers? Dan Pastorini, the quarterback, 3rd overall pick in 1971, and he had suffered with them through these losing seasons, terrible coaches. And then Bub Phillips came in 75, started turning around the franchise. Well, Dan, who drank a lot back then, hadn't had a drink now in like 15 years. And he's in great shape, great guy. We've got to be really good friends. And when I'm covering teams, I'm never friends with anybody. But I made a lot of friends with the Oilers since their careers ended. And the times back then, covering teams were different. We could go in the locker room before practice. We could stay in after practice. We could talk to players whenever we wanted. We could talk to coaches. We could watch all practice. And you got to know players and coaches a lot better. You just did. And so in 1977, Pastorini was at a boat show, a boat race, and he lost control of his boat and he killed some people. And he hadn't talked to the media. And they tell me, I want you to go to their training camp and don't come back without an interview with Dan Pastorini because he hadn't talked to the media. And I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking, what kind of reception am I going to get from him? And so they had 1 year in Nacogdoches, and it was so hot up there because when you're in all those tall trees, the heat doesn't have anywhere to go. And I never forget, 36 players spent at least one night in the hospital getting IV'd. And so they did that 1 year, and then they moved to San Angelo. But I went, and God, back then the dorms were so bad. Those compared to what players have today, I tell players today, they back then, first day of camp, they put on full pads, had full contact, and they just had killed each other because the coaches used training camp to get them in shape. And today they don't ever have full contact. And I tell guys today, if you guys had to deal with what they did, you'd be calling your mommy. And I don't think they believe me, but I went up there and I introduced myself to Pastorini coming off practice field, asked him if I could get some time with him, do a story for the Chronicle. And I thought he's going to tell me, get the hell out of the way, but he didn't. He said, how about I get out of meetings about 9:30, meet me on the lower level of the ground floor, and we'll talk until I've got to go to curfew. And which was 11. And I said, okay, I get there early, about 9:15. Casey comes early, didn't. 9:25, he's not there. 9:30, he's not there. 9:35, 9:40, and I think he stiffed me. And right when I was getting ready to go to my room, 9:45, he comes around the corner. He's got a 6-pack of Budweiser. He shakes my hand, says, let's go over in the corner. So we go sit at a table, and it wasn't anything I did. If Dale Robertson from the Post, because he and Dale were not crossways with each other till 79 when they had their famous incident before Steelers playoff game. But if Dale had approached him when I did, I'm sure he would have done it. And so he was looking. I think I told him since then, I bet it's like he cut a vein and started to bleed. And his quotes were incredible. And so I had an incredible story, not because of me and not what I wrote. I basically strung together all of his quotes, but the fact is nobody else had it, and he was great, and that's one of the reasons I ended up covering the Oilers. And I'll never forget that, and I also will always appreciate him giving me that interview that allowed me to get my foot in the door. 48, this is my 48th year covering NFL.
Wow.
That's crazy.
That's incredible.
What I was gonna ask, like, what's your favorite part about journalism in general? But I guess all the stories that you've been able to like see and be a part of, like, I feel like that answers that.
When the Oilers moved, I didn't want to cover. Well, first of all, when they moved, I thought we wouldn't get an expansion team. I remember writing a column saying, bet the house the NFL's going to LA, because they wanted to go to LA.
Right.
They sent Roger Goodell out there to go hang out with all the stars and try to lay the groundwork. But they couldn't decide on a stadium. They couldn't decide on how it was financed, where it was going to go. And Bob McNair had all his ducks in a row. He was the only one that wanted a team for here. And he kept telling me he was going to get it because his spies on their committee and their politicians out there told them they can't decide on anything. They're warring factions. But I spent a lot of time with McNair, got to know him really well starting in 1997. But I covered the NFL for 8 years. And I covered the NFL the first 3 years of the Texans. And think about this. I went anywhere I wanted to go. I spent any amount of money I wanted to spend. And I wrote whatever I wanted. And I went to where the best games were. For instance, that's right. 2001 is when the Patriots got good, and I love Boston. I'd take my wife with me, and we'd have a blast going up and eating lobster and lobster rolls, chowder on the water. But I would work and get my stories in and everything. And I spent a lot of time down in Tampa because Tony Dungy turned around that franchise, and I love Dungy, and I love the Tampa area. And it was great. And one of the things I would do when I went, I'd go Tuesday night and I'd go to the facilities Wednesday and Thursday. I got to spend a lot of time with general managers and coaches and PR people. And it was a blast. And I'll never forget, always kept up with the Texans. And when I came back in town, I would go over to their practices. And back then, Dom Capers and Charlie Cashley, the coach and GM, would invite me and other members of the media to come into the cafeteria and have lunch with them. We just couldn't do it when the players were in there. And so those were fun times when you got to get to know people. And then I'll never forget our sports editor, Dan Cunningham, saying, well, Carlton Thompson, he was the beat writer. He wants to take over this opening we have for assistant sports editor. And Fred Fowler, who's on the assistant sports editor, is going to be promoted to sports editor, and we need somebody to cover the Texans for a year. Will you do it? I couldn't say no, and I said sure. That's 2005. And I said I didn't want to cover a terrible team anymore, but they'd finished 7-9. So I said, wow, in 2005, man, they're going to have a winning record. They're going to compete for the playoffs. And they were 2-14. And then he told me, well, it's something called the internet is being created, and newspapers are losing a lot of money. So we need you can either stay on the Texans or you can do sidebars on their games. And I said I would stay on it. And I've been doing radio all that time. I tell you, I'd say 75% of the people that I meet, and I meet a lot and try to be nice to everybody, talk to them, tell me I've loved listening to you on the radio for years. A guy approached me in the press box. He was young, he's naggy, and he said, my dad, my granddad, they've been listening to you. And I said, well, thanks for not saying your great granddad. And I get that a lot. And a lot of them say writing, but mostly it's radio and TV to a certain extent. But I know I got a face and a body for radio. And I've never, at least since I got married the second time. And when I quit smoking in 88, I ran 3 miles a day, played racquetball, tennis, a bunch of sports. And then I quit smoking, started eating everything in sight and gained 100 pounds. And so, but I've always enjoyed doing them because it's easy. All I'm doing is talking sports anyway. And the first night I was at KTRH on a paying gig, I walked outside and there's a security guard there. And I said, arrest me. I went over and put my hands on the wall, spread my legs. He said, what are you doing? I said, you need to arrest me because I've been in there stealing for the last hour. And I think he pulled his gun. And I explained it to him. And that's the way I feel. To get paid, talk for sports, and to write about sports. I have not worked a day since I mowed yards in Waco before I became a sports writer. I have been truly blessed.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's crazy.
I wish I could feel like that.
Go ahead, Rios.
So,
well, I'll tell you, like Carlos, I hope I can tell him this.
Yeah.
You didn't say it's off the record. So Carlos and I went down from the press box and we went and stood in the hallway outside of the Texans auditorium before the media went in. And of course, it was Carlos's first time, so I was trying to help him as much as I can. And then when the game, we were watching on a big TV screen in the hallway outside the auditorium. And when the game ended, I said, well, follow me. And we went in. And when we were walking into the auditorium, he said, if you'd have told me 15 years ago I'd been walking into the Texans auditorium with John McClain, I wouldn't have believed it. And I thought that was, I don't even know if I turned around and said anything to you.
I remember you. Yeah, it was a great experience.
And I wanted to tell you how much I appreciated that. And because I get that a lot. Yeah. My wife says it all goes to my head and I've got a big ego. Maybe I do at home, but I certainly don't anywhere else because I've run into too many people who were humble when being approached. And I've run into a bunch of them that were a-holes, which just drives me crazy. And that's not just in the media business, that's in the movie business. But, man, the ones that are nice. And I remember Jerry Trupiano told me when I started working for him, he said, because he had come from KMOX in St. Louis, maybe the greatest station in history. They had Jack Buck and Harry Carey and all these great announcers through
Eric
the
Harry. Oh,
And he said, Jack Buck told me when I was a young guy at KMOX, he said, when somebody comes up to you to talk to you, if you're nice to them, they're going to tell 10 people how nice you are.
Mhm.
But if you're a jerk, they're going to tell 20 that
Mhm.
you're a jerk. And then each of them is going to tell 20 more, and word's going to spread that you're a jerk. And so I never forgot about that. And I still remember it. My wife and I go to a lot of movies, and she said, "You talk to the popcorn popper about football." And if he asks, and I said, "Yeah, because you like to go so damn early."
Yeah.
And I'll sit down and rather talk football than sit in there watching cartoons before the movie starts. So
Yeah.
I've always thought that was very important.
Yeah.
First time I went to the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a member of the selection committee 32 years ago, I believe, in Canton. And I was on the committee. I was officially on the committee, and they have on Friday a luncheon that is an orientation for the new members. And the new members can't talk. They have to just listen to the players talk to them about what being in the Hall of Fame means. And the first time I went, I was the only person from the selection committee there. There were a couple of members from the Hall of Fame board. I don't know if I knew more than one person from the Hall of Fame. And I go in and my hands are shaking, and they have a meet and greet with each other where they get drinks and they bring things for each other to sign. And I got a Diet Coke, and my hand was shaking so bad I couldn't take a sip. So I put it up next to my chest to keep my hand from shaking. And I went over and stood in the corner, and I'm watching Johnny Unitas and Jim Brown and Lou Groza and Deacon Jones and Ray Nitschke and Paul Horning and Jim Taylor and all these greatest players in history that I had grown up watching on TV. And I'm sitting there, and I basically can't move. I want to get out of there, because when we go sit at dinner at the lunch tables, where the hell am I going to sit? I can't walk up to one of their tables and say, "Can I sit here?" But this guy came up to me, and I knew who he was when he walked up, and he's standing next to me, didn't introduce himself, and he's looking at the crowd, and he said, "We've all been there." And I said, "I'm sorry." He said, "We've all been there." I said, "Where?" He said, "Where you are right now. We all came here for the first time, and we were all nervous. And I'm guessing you're nervous." I said, "I'm so nervous, I can't take a sip of this Diet Coke." And he started laughing. He said, "That kind of reminds me of when I was here the first time." He said, "You wouldn't be here if you didn't belong." I said, "I'm just a sports writer." And he said, "Well, like I said, you wouldn't be here if you didn't belong. Everybody here knows you belong. So relax a little bit and try to have a little fun." He said, "By the way, I'm Yale Larry." Well, he's the only Aggie in the Hall of Fame from Fort Worth, Detroit safety, great punter. And he was part of those Lions teams in the 50s that won back-to-back championships. So he introduced me around. And so after that, I decided if somebody came in that door and looked like a deer caught in the headlights, I'd go right over to him, introduce myself, and say, "Let me take you around and introduce you to some people." And I've always done that until they kicked us out of that luncheon. They got it where they didn't want anybody in there but the players. So Goodell couldn't go in there anymore. Jerry Jones and the owners on the Hall of Fame committee can't go in there anymore. But boy, I went to that probably about 15 times. And you talk about something else, you can't write about it. They always say you can't write about it. Well, they never told me I couldn't talk about it.
That's true.
There you go.
I'll agree with the being nervous thing. When we went to the locker room and I interviewed Aziz Al-Shair, like I was a nervous wreck and trying to formulate a question. And first thing he says, I was like, "Sorry, man, it's my first time here." And he's like, "Hey, man, it's all good. It's all good. We're good." And he just made me feel a lot better. And I asked him a question, and I thought that was awesome.
Well, you asked a question to Miko, and you got it out with no problem.
Oh, I know. It was crazy.
You sound like a seasoned pro.
Thank you. That was awesome. Having D'Amico answer my question, and then Like I'm writing an article based on the question that he answered me about Jalen this week. That was surreal. Like that's an incredible experience.
Are you on the list to get all the quotes every day? They send out quotes they transcribe.
Right. I know that I'm for the Giants one and then the Rams one coming up.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about daily quotes.
Oh, I'm not aware. I don't think I am, John.
Well, you need to email them over there and ask them if you can get on the quote list. Like I'm writing this week. Let's see. Today I wrote about Mechie. I'm writing something about the running game. I'm writing about the young DBs, and I'm going to write about Petrie and Stingley next week as they get ready for the start of the regular season. Mm-hmm. And I've gone back through all the quote sheets, and I have taken out all these quotes from these players, by these players. They do a great job of transcribing the interviews that we do in the media room on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. I don't go over there on Friday. And it is a great tool for us to use.
Yeah, it's amazing.
In fact, if you're writing about Petrie, send me a text or I'll forget. I've got a bunch of the quotes since I'm writing on him too, and I'll send you everything.
All right, no deal. I got you, John. Appreciate you.
By the way, I thought it was Shire because that's what D'Amico calls him, but it's Shire.
Shire. Okay.
I heard John Harris call him Shire. And they have a pronunciation guide that they put on their every week in their release. Like if you go on, I showed you NFLOMG.com, and you click on it, and you'll see their media release, and you click on that, and it'll give you click on media, and you'll see every kind of information, quotes, notes, biographies, everything you could possibly want for the NFL, and you get signed up for that. But I would email the PR people and ask them if you can get on the daily quotes, the releases,
release quotes,
and the quote sheets.
Damn, I'm definitely doing that. When you said Shire, I was thinking of the Lord of the Rings for some reason. Like Shire,
that came to mind.
Rios, I know you had a question for John. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, actually, going back to football, you mentioned you're about to write an article on John Mechie. How would you rate his performance this past Saturday?
Well, that was posted today on HoustonTexans.com, where I write 3 times a week. When the season starts, if they're good, I may do like I did last year at Sports Radio 610's website and write more. But I don't take money from the Texans. It'd be a conflict of interest. So not getting paid, I don't know how motivated I am to write more than 3.
That's fair.
So last week, and I think any of us, if we were talking about what receiver is going to make the team, we wouldn't have put Mechie on there. He hadn't done squat. And then all of a sudden he gets showcased, and we're like, aha, he looks like he did as a junior at Alabama. And when you think about what he was going against last year, it's still amazing. It's taken him a while. He has definitely made this team. He's the 4th receiver. And my 6 that I picked were Xavier Hutchinson. They love him. And then the 7th one would come down to Noah Brown, a veteran. But if they want to keep Steven Sims as a returner, I don't think they want a guy who is just a returner. But I think the other guys are gone. And remember, you can keep 16 guys have to clear waivers, and you can sign on the practice squad. And that'll take care of a lot of problems at running back and wide receiver. I don't think Robert Woods, Robert doesn't play any special teams, and I think that's working against him. Ben Skoranek, who hadn't showed me anything, they say he's a great special teams player. He's hurt. I can't imagine anybody would claim him so they could sign him to the practice squad. So anyway, it's Mechie I thought was outstanding. And one of the things I noticed about him, when he scored that touchdown, Stroud and the other receivers, I think, ran on the field to congratulate him.
I saw that.
Everybody loves John Mechie III. And if they tried to put him on the practice squad, people see that tape. If you got somebody you want to protect, don't give them an opportunity like that. But the fact is, they needed to see it, and they saw it. It wasn't just his touchdown. He had first down catches. He had double-digit catches. I thought he looked really good.
Yeah, he looked like the Mechie from Alabama.
He did.
Yeah, that was good to see John Mechie out there doing that. He was you could tell he was excited. That little dance he did or whatever at the end zone. It was great seeing him out there because they need that. It's another weapon, It's another weapon.
Remember the Pittsburgh game last year? They're 0-2. They beat Jacksonville by 20. They come back here, and they were missing some starters.
Yeah.
And I looked up one time and saw this, that TJ Watt had like 2 tackles, no sacks, maybe 1 hit or 1 tackle for loss. He just got stymied. And I look up one time and I see Mechie slowing him down and blocking him like a maniac. And that's John Mechie and TJ Watt. So I looked at him later. He did the same thing. So he's a really good worker and a tough blocker who'll do anything. And that's one reason everybody loves the guy so much. And I'll guarantee you all of them are like, whew. They may say, oh, yeah, he was going to make the team all along. I don't think so.
Yeah, no, exactly. I wanted to ask you about one of the spots that I've been very interested in is seeing Cam Akers just almost solidify his role in this offense, seeing those runs. Now, of course, it is preseason, but seeing Dameon Pierce's production as of late, I mean, I can't imagine him being running back number 2. What are your thoughts on the running back position there, John?
On Texans radio this morning, I said, everybody I see doing these rosters now, Jonathan Alexander, the Chronicle, they all have Dameon Pierce on there. And I said, why?
Mm-hmm.
What has Dameon done that makes you think he needs to be on the roster other than what he did as a rookie in a totally different system? Mm-hmm. Yes, he's a great guy. Yes, he's great for culture. But who are you going to cut to make room for him?
Yeah.
What does he have? 8 carries for 9 yards?
Yeah.
The people say, well, Laramie Tunsil didn't play. And I told him this morning, he's not a run blocker. He's a pass protector.
Pass protector, yeah.
I still think the offensive line's a problem when it comes to run blocking. And last year they had an excuse with injuries, and so far they don't. Mm-hmm. So I'm writing about the running game, I think, for Friday. And we haven't seen Joe Mixon, and the coaches obviously think that they don't need to play him. Now, he's had a quad injury or a hamstring. I don't know. And he's out there working in practice like crazy. But he's not going to play in this game. I don't think any of the starters will. And the thing about Joe Mixon, Jawar Jordan, all these guys, Bobby Slowick signed off on them, said they can play in this system. He didn't have a choice to sign off on Dameon Pierce. I think Dameon should be traded. I think that Cam Akers has been terrific. He was signed as a body, and then all of a sudden he comes in, makes a few plays. He hadn't done great, but he's done better than Pierce. Mm-hmm. And Jawar Jordan's a draft choice. He's going to make it. Mm-hmm. And then the key is, do you keep Dario Gumbawali, who's a really good special teams player? You're going to keep the fullback. They played fullback, I think, 3rd most in the league last year. I think 1st and 2nd was San Francisco and Baltimore. And but maybe you could put British Brooks on the practice squad because he looked good.
He had 2 touchdowns last week?
Yeah, and when I watch those guys, the key to this system is the lineman blocked sideways. Right. And they try to hit and then get on the second level because the back is supposed to get the ball and he's supposed to go to the left or the right, and he's supposed to plant his foot and take off and hit the right hole. And Dameon Pierce just can't do it. He's tried, but so far he just hasn't been able to do it. Now, maybe against the Rams, it'll be his coming out party like it was for John Mechie, and people go, okay, he's figured it out and he's on the team. But, boy, they're going to have to get rid of somebody good because I don't see him cutting Akers. Maybe they will because maybe they're not going to let Jordan get away because they drafted him for a reason.
Exactly. I agree. I think Rios has mentioned before in our regular group chats, Dameon Pierce would probably be better off as a trade somewhere.
He would be.
Yeah.
Go to a team that plays
what could you possibly get for him, though?
Oh, I love draft choice.
Probably like a 6, 7th rounder, which I would take.
Mixon was a 7. Sometimes, like, if they hadn't offered a pick for Mixon, he was going to be out there for anybody to get.
Right.
And so giving us 7, I think that was a really good deal. He's averaged 12 touchdowns over the last 3 years. And they haven't had it. Their running game's terrible. They haven't had a 1,000-yard season since Carlos Hyde, barely. They haven't had a good running back since Arian Foster. I'm doing a column next week because we got days where the team's not there. They give them 3 days off, and I'm looking for ideas. And I'm going to ask if you could bring back a player from the Texans' past who was in his prime to help this team this season, who would it be? And I'm going to go over the possibilities, and I'm going to rule out Andre Johnson because they got plenty of receivers. I'm ruling out J.J. Watt because they got 3 defensive ends, and he never liked playing inside. And I'm going with Arian Foster. Arian in his prime was a great runner, receiver, and blocker, and I think he could help this team more than anybody.
Oh, definitely. I think the Texans fans were spoiled with Arian Foster.
Yeah,
in that time.
I would just love JJ in this team, man. Like just the leadership that he would bring.
Yeah, but JJ want to start. You can't bench Will Anderson Jr. or Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, no,
exactly. Poppy,
and that's not happening. JJ's not coming back. All that stuff to get the fans fired
up. No.
Media, that's all BS.
Let me dream. Oh man, no, I would love that. I would love that. But now let's move forward a little bit to the regular season. Can you give us a prediction as to what you think this team might do in the regular season?
Well, first of all, I see a lot of national people have them as a Super Bowl contender, and I'm like, why? Like, they have never even been past the second round of the playoffs ever. We haven't had a team in the championship game since the Oilers after the 79 season. I think 25 is when they'd be a legitimate Super Bowl contender because last year they capitalized on a last place schedule. They played the worst division in football, the NFC South, still lost to Carolina and Atlanta on last-second field goals. And the crossover game was Arizona here. Now they play first-place schedule, 5 defending division champions, 11 of 17 games against teams with winning records. They play against Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Tua Tagovailoa, Dak Prescott, the division quarterbacks. They're going to get Caleb Williams, and it is a murderer's row of what they're going to face. They need to get off to a good start. Schedule's not – they've won in Indy the last 2 years. They should beat the Bears here in prime time. They shouldn't be getting beat by Sam Darnold in the third game, and then it gets tougher. And I could see them being better than last year, but the record not being as good, might be 9-8. Now, the one thing that I'm taking into account, and I did a thing for HoustonTexans.com after the schedule came out, in which I predicted each game, and I went ahead and made them 11-7, and 11-6.
Yeah, I was going to say 11-6.
And I hope I didn't do 11-7, 11-6, and because one thing I think I look at the really good teams and they got real good coaches, and D'Amico's a really good coach. They have real good staffs. D'Amico's got a really good staff, especially on offense coaching Stroud. And those teams have great quarterbacks. And the Texans have a great quarterback. And every day when I'm watching Stroud in practice, we get to watch him in training camp. And then we don't after that, except for stretching. And I watch him make throws that his accuracy is just unbelievable. And I watch the kind of leader he is, the way he interacts with his teammates, not just offense, but on defense, the way he talks to defensive coaches as well as offensive coaches. He wants to be coached. And Bobby Slowick will be gone after this season. Then Gerard Johnson will get promoted to offensive coordinator. In a couple of years, he'll be gone for head coach. But it's like the 49ers and the Ravens and all those perennially good teams. You have to have backup position coaches who become position coaches, who become coordinators, and they know your system. So I think that they've got – D'Amico is a great coach with a great coaching staff, and that's why I could see them having a better record and becoming among the best teams in the NFL, and not one that had to win the last game of the season to win the AFC South over Indy and Jacksonville.
There you
We're gonna win the Super Bowl. We're gonna win the Super Bowl.
go.
So, I guess, you talk about the schedule. Which games do you have marked on your calendar like you're really looking forward to as far as the Texans go?
When I see the schedule come out, first thing I do is look and see who they play in the first game, who their first road game is. I look at the AFC South, see when they play them. And one of the reasons I retired from the Chronicle in 22, I didn't want to travel anymore. I've been doing that for 45 years. I didn't want to fight. Our airport is in such bad shape.
Yes.
Makes me sick to even go out there.
Yeah.
My wife travels a lot, and she makes me take her and pick her up. And so I do it. But I don't want to fight stadiums anymore. I used to go to games 3 hours early. Now when they're on the road, I can walk and sit down in my shorts and T-shirts 5 minutes before the game. I go to all the local games, and I still go 3 hours early. But I just got tired of doing that after 45 years and counting the arrows. I did it for 47 years at the Chronicle. And while I love – one of the things I've learned about watching road games, I can tell more being in front of the TV than you can in the press box when you're way the hell up and in the corner or the end zone and people are talking to you and you can't have the sound up. I liked having the sound up where I can hear, you get injury reports quicker. So I like doing it like that. And I still get D'Amico and I still get Stroud after the game. Mm-hmm. And then I have the visiting PR guy, most of whom I know, text me quotes from the locker room. So I've got everything I need without going there. And if there was some question I needed to ask, and usually there's not going to be because they got journalists there. They know what to ask.
Yeah.
But if I did, I'd text Jonathan Alexander at the Chronicle, who does a great job, and I'd ask him, if you got time, can you please ask so-and-so this? And but there's certain cities that I like to go to still. And in the old days, I'd look, okay, which road trip am I going to like? Which ones my wife want to go to? She want to go to Boston, New York, Miami, Washington, or all the West Coast cities, or Denver, never cared about the Midwest cities, or of course up in the North. But that's what I looked at. And this season, I wonder if it's going to be like 2019. Texans went to Kansas City. Mahomes threw 3 touchdown passes. The Texans beat them in regular season. And then when they had them down 23 points in the playoffs, and I thought everybody in the press box was going, man, they're going to win this game. And I said, I got one word for you. What? Buffalo.
Oh, yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Every Houston fan is fully aware of that one.
I think if they get in that position again, no matter where it is, D'Amico's not going to make mistakes like O'Brien did. And one of the things about D'Amico that goes underrated, O'Brien used to get so mad when we'd have to ask him questions about his clock management or about play calls and things like that. He didn't care if we wrote he was a bad coach or he's a jerk or whatever. But if you question these guys' football IQs, they go ballistic. Before Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid was noted as one of the worst clock managers in the NFL. Now he's won Super Bowls. Nobody ever brings it up because he got a great quarterback. How many Hall of Fame coaches didn't have great quarterbacks? Joe Gibbs is the only one, won 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks who never mentioned Hall of Fame in the same sentence. But all the other great head coaches had great quarterbacks. And, Belichick had Brady and Reid's got Mahomes, and maybe Ryans will have Stroud. But D'Amico has not had one issue. And I pointed that out the other day when we were in the media room, just BSing, and everybody's like, you're right. He hasn't. And boy, that helps, because remember when O'Brien seemed to have issues after every game. I asked him a question after they lost the Patriots game when Brady threw to Cooks for the winning touchdown.
Right.
Bill should have called a timeout because the Patriots had I think it was a pass that wasn't caught they got credit for. And I asked him about it, and he stormed off and didn't talk to me for 2 months.
Jesus.
I mean, a blessing in disguise, really.
Yeah, I was just, at this point, yeah. Blessing in disguise, John. Blessing in disguise. John, I wanted to bring it back real quick to one player that I mentioned over there, Jalen Petrie, and you and I kind of talked about this a little bit in the right before D'Amico came out. They're playing Jalen Petrie more in that hybrid safety / linebacker.
They're playing him like he played at Baylor.
Like Baylor, right?
Mike's taking him so long to figure it out is just blowing me away.
Yeah.
And as a Baylor alum who watched every game that Petrie played, and it was when Aranda got there, they called it a star, STAR, all caps position. And they moved him there, which was covering slot receivers, blitzing, making plays in the running game around the line of scrimmage or in the backfield. He did both. He had the easy pick 6. We could have scored on one.
Yeah.
And he had, I think, a 5-yard loss on a run play.
Mm-hmm.
They pulled him. And he's so much more comfortable now.
Yeah.
And sometimes he'll drop back. He's not always going to be around the line of scrimmage, but that's where he was best. That's where he was Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. Mm-hmm. And I can't find out whose idea it was. Of course, it's always going to be D'Amico's, and it might have been D'Amico's. So I look for big things from him. And the thing would be cool, and I think Kamari Lassiter is going to be great.
Yeah.
And I'm writing this will be next week. I pulled D'Amico off to the side last week, and I said, I got to ask you something I bet you hadn't thought of. He said, what? I said, when you came here in 2006 in the second round, nobody said when you were drafted, this guy's going to be a starter. They said, this guy will compete like all these other players, Eric Winston, Charles Spencer. And, of course, we knew Mario Williams would start because he's the first overall pick. I said, but when you got here in the off-season program, you seized the position and became an instant starter and never looked back. And now Kamari Lassiter, second-round pick, who you all said was going to have to compete, and then he comes in here and seizes the position the way you do. And I want to ask you about similarities. And he gave me what it was like for him, what it's like for Kamari. And so I think Lassiter is going to be great. I think Petrie's going to be really good. Stingley's going to be all pro. And the key is Jimmy Ward's going to get hurt. And the key is Kalen Bullock. They love the guy, his range. He looks like a basketball player.
Yeah.
He's 6'3" and he's skinny. They'll put some meat on him in the year that he's here on the weight program. But, man, can he run. He had that hard hit against the Bears, forced a fumble. He had that almost interception against the Steelers when he came across the field, showed his range. I think they're dying to start him, but they won't do it till they think he's ready. Mm-hmm. And the one thing to keep in mind about everything, and you all better knock on wood, this time last year, they already had 3 or 4 players on injured reserve, including 2 linemen. They had other guys, Juice Scruggs. He was out for weeks. Mm-hmm. And this year, so far, they've been able to avoid the kind of injuries that killed them. And when you think about last season, they had more injuries than any offensive line in football. They started 11 different offensive linemen because of injuries. And despite having a first-year coach, first-year coordinator, and play caller, first-year quarterback coach, and a rookie quarterback, they still finished 10-7. It was an amazing achievement when you analyze what they were able to overcome. Losing Tank when they did. Collins missed a couple of games, had no running game, and yet Stroud and Ryans and Slowick, they still managed to get to the second round of the playoffs and be tied with the Ravens at halftime.
Yeah.
And that was, to me, an amazing achievement.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I was gonna. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm sorry before I move on.
No.
You're good. I was gonna ask you. You were part. Andre Johnson became the first Houston Texan to become a Hall of Famer, and you were a part of that as well. Can you tell us the story of how it all basically happened with Andre Johnson leading up to the Hall of Fame?
Because I'm the Texans, Houston's representative on our committee, and I've been on there, I think, 30 years officially, and a couple of years I was on it before I was official because our guy, Mickey Gerskowitz from the Chronicle, didn't go to the Super Bowl, and I went And that's when we did it the day before the Super Bowl. And so any Oilers that come up, I present them to our committee. Andre is the first Texans I presented. First 2 years, he didn't make it. He was a finalist at 15. He made the cut to 10, but he couldn't get to 5. Because you get to 5, it's guaranteed that you're going to get it. And the problem was he got canceled out by Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt. And I was going against Bill Polian and Tony Dungy, the guys that drafted him and coached him, Reggie Wayne. And I almost thought they should recuse themselves. But this third year, and I kept Andre up to date on what my presentation would be, and I would call him and tell him you didn't make it. And he was always great. And then I thought maybe the third time would be a charm. And I have now presented 8 players. The previous year, I represented on the seniors committee. I've been on that for years, and I asked the Hall if I could present Chuck Howley, the great Cowboys linebacker, who had never even been a finalist. And he retired 50 years, and he had Alzheimer's. And I called him, and I said, look, when he made the finals, I said, I'd like to present him because I saw every game he played because I was a diehard Cowboy fan until I came here in 76. So I saw every game. And they said, okay, he's all yours. And he made it. And so it's being on that committee is an incredible responsibility. And it's so rewarding. And it's such an honor to be able to present guys. And nothing makes you feel worse when you present somebody who doesn't make it. And I felt terrible for Andre those first 2 years, as I did with Mike Munchak and Elvin Bethea. Warren Moon and Bruce Matthews were first-timers. Robert Brazil was a senior. Curly Culp was a senior. But those guys are always so appreciative because when they get in the Hall of Fame, they turn to mush. Doesn't matter how mean they were when they played, how bad they were to deal with, how they tried to intimidate you. When they find out they're in the Hall of Fame, they all bawl like a baby. Now, Andre, I told him this year I always tried to change my presentation. You don't want to hit them up with the same numbers and everything. It goes in one ear and out the other. So I decided one of the things I like to hear are great coaches, defensive coordinator, players that go against them, what they say about them. And so I called, I got in touch with Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel, who coached him here. And both of them gave me some really good quotes. And the way you do it is when it's your time to come, it's usually in alphabetical order. We've been on Zoom lately, not in the room like we used to be. And you got 7 minutes and the clock's up there and you go through it. And you have a strategy. And when we were in person, I always stood up, looked around the room, and I always patterned what I did after the TV show Law and Order, in which they make Sam Waterston, the great actor, make his closing arguments to the jury. And that's what I always tried to do. Can't do that on Zoom. So did it on Zoom. And then once I finish, others can talk about it. And then when they're through, before they go to the next one, they say, okay, John McClain, you got anything to add? And I would save something very telling, a stat or a quote, and I would give them that. And at the end of the day, when we'd all finished our presentations, they would go back around the room. And when they get to me and they'd say, McClain, you got something to add about Andre Johnson? I said, I do. Because some of them would say, no, but I've already said everything I can say. So the last thing I used was a quote from Kyle Shanahan about if he was starting a team today, Andre'd be one of, if not the first player he'd want on his team. And then I did something I've never done. And I never say I because people don't care what I think. But I told him, I said, guys, I've been covering NFL a long time, and I've never seen a player who epitomized more what we want in the Hall of Fame than Andre on and off the field. Off the field's not supposed to count. But I told him, I said, and I watched every practice and every game, and I know he would be perfect, the personification of what a Hall of Fame wide receiver should be. And so he made the cut from 15 to 10. And then I had my fingers crossed. I had my toes crossed. And when they called the last five in alphabetical order, and they said Andre Johnson, I hit the video on my computer, and I stood up and started doing like this. And then I hit the video on my computer, and I'm back like this. I want to act like I've been in the end zone before.
Yeah.
And we couldn't tell them. The Hall of Fame, under their new leadership, they like to surprise them with what they call the big reveal, the door knock. And they have to have an elaborate plan. And I recommended his agent and best friend, Kennard McGuire. And Kennard concocted a great plan to get to Andre's house with supposedly his attorney. And he goes over there, and it was Kennard had told Andre for years, because he's like Kennard's brother, and he's like an uncle to his kids. And so he always told Andre, if something were to happen to him and his wife, I want you to take care of the kids, and I want to put you in my will. And so Andre's like, okay. And so he told him, he said, my attorney and I are coming over to your house to finally do the will. And we're going to be over there at 2:00 on Friday. And we need witnesses. So I think you should bring your mom and your brother. And of course, Andre has a daughter that lives with him. And so I'm the only person that's ever done this. And I did it with Chuck Howley last year, because his family invited me to come up and be there when Chuck, who has Alzheimer's, didn't know what planet he was on, was told by knock on the door. He lives next to Roger Staubach, and they opened the door. His son was holding him where he couldn't walk away. Chuck looked great for 86, dressed as well, but he's just got Alzheimer's real bad. And they opened the door, and the boom mics come in from NFL Films, and walking in that door in their Hall of Fame gold jackets, Roger Staubach, Bob Lilly, Mel Renfro, Cliff Harris, along with Leroy Jordan and Charlie Waters. And they came in shaking his hand, patting him on the back, and then they went to his humongous living room and talked about his career. And Chuck just sat there nodding. And I had gone with Mattress Mac, because he grew up a diehard Cowboy fan like me. And Mac and I were in the back of the room, just one of the few times we've ever been quiet. And it was such an emotional experience. And I interviewed all of them about Chuck. And I wrote this long story that ran in Gallery Sports, which Mac had founded. And I was the main columnist. And then he folded after about 10 months. And I had so much fun doing it and got such a good response from the Hall of Fame. I said, if Andre Johnson makes it, I want to do the same thing. Excuse me. So I was in a parking lot down the street from Andre's neighborhood, and I was an hour late coming from Orlando. And Kennard had told Andre, well, my attorney's coming in town. He's going to be an hour late. So they had these two big cargo vans and an SUV, and I fell in line behind them, and they had the code to the gate, go in. The house is huge, and they had all this down to a pat. Whispered, didn't close the door, left the doors cracked. They knew what order they wanted to get in, with the boom mics first, and then Chris Carter, Hall of Fame receiver in his gold jacket, being in the front. And they go up, and Chris bangs on the door, no answer. Bangs on the door again, and Andre opens it real slow. His mother starts screaming, and Andre starts crying. And Chris is shaking his hand, put his hand on his shoulder, congratulating him on being a class of 2024. And Andre couldn't talk. He said when I interviewed him afterward, he didn't even remember that. He didn't even remember Chris standing there. And he had to go compose himself in his den till he could come talk. And I've never seen Andre like that before. And that's because it means so much to him.
Right.
So I wrote the story, and I just got laid off by 6:10. And I called the Texans, called Mark Vandermeer. He said, I'm going to write this story. It's going to be a hell of a story. You want to write it on your website. So they had to talk to people from the website, and they called me. And he said, hell yeah, we'll run it. So that's the first of about 40 stories I've written for him. And it was just so emotional and being there. And after going to Canton and be part of all that, I called J.J. Watt, and I first texted him, and I said, I'd like to do a column on you about you being next. Every guy who has a chance to go to the Hall of Fame doesn't want to talk about it. They're afraid they're going to jinx it. He didn't want to do it. I talked him into doing it, and he was great as always. So I wrote that column for HoustonTexans.com, and I'm telling everybody, it's Hall of Fame weekend is always the first weekend in August. 4 years from now, 2028, you better get your reservations early because Tom Brady's coming, and with Brady and Watt and whoever else, there won't be a hotel room between Cleveland, Akron, and Canton down into the Amish country because so many people will be there.
Yeah,
That's going to be amazing. Once we see the second Texan go in, it was amazing seeing Andre Johnson because what better guy than Andre deserves all that, all the what he did for the organization during the bad times, during the good times, and things like that. No one more deserving at the time, and like you said, JJ Watt is next. So
yeah.
JJ kept talking about how happy he was that Andre went in first.
Yeah.
I worried that Andre and Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt were going to keep canceling each other out for another 4 years because we've seen that happen. Swan and Stallworth went forever before we broke that log jam. There was another group, Andre Reed, Tim Brown, and maybe Michael Irvin. I can't remember. They were caught in a log jam canceling each other out. And I didn't want JJ to go in the Hall of Fame first before Andre. But you know what? I don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yep.
There you go. Guys, John, I want to thank you for joining us this evening. It's always a pleasure having you on and just listening to your stories. I could listen to your stories for hours and hours and on end, man, seriously. And honestly, and me personally, I do want to thank you for being such a great help on my first time being there at the press box and just kind of showing me the ropes around there. That was very welcoming and amazing from you. And I guess that's why a lot of people like myself look up to not just your writing, but you as an individual. So thank you for that. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you. And when we get off here, Carlos, I'm going to cut and paste all those DB quotes I have, including everything from Petrie, and I'm going to send it to you immediately.
That works. I appreciate it, John.
Take guys.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, John. Guys, follow John McClain on his Twitter. His X handle at McClain_on_NFL, just like it appears there. And also, don't forget to follow us as well at where is it? There it is. At the bottom, subscribe to our YouTube channel at BBlitzPod. Follow us on our Instagram account as well, BBlitzPod, and of course our X account, BBlitzPod. It's all the same thing. And of course, this is all part of our Esquina. As it shows right there, follow at R Esquina on the X account at R Esquina, along with their Instagram account, of course, at R Esquina, just like that. And finally, I know it's like I feel like a promoter here.
Yeah.
And finally, follow the guys from Full Steam Ahead, who are also part of R Esquina for some top tier Astros and MLB content. A lot of great stuff going on in R Esquina. As you can see, we got the great John McClain as well here, part of our Esquina. So as well, John, again, it's a pleasure having you on, and we hope to see you again soon on our show.
Check me out on HoustonTexans.com, guys. Thank you very much. Anytime you want to do it again, let me know.
Appreciate you. That's good. That's going to be it for us, guys. See y'all next week. Peace.